Welcome back everyone. Time to do a later part of 2020 review of a phone that I've kind of talked about a lot this year, and that phone is the Samsung Galaxy Note 8. Now we've gotten, this phone came out in 2017, and it's definitely not a new phone by any means, but it still has quite a bit of capability for sure. And we've gotten the successor of this device, which is the Note 20 lineup. And surprisingly, there are some reasons why the Note 8 may be a better feeling phone, at least than the Note 20. But price tag wise, these things are selling for less than $300 in a lot of places. And I guarantee you on eBay, you can probably find one for like around $150, but I'll find the cheapest one on Amazon. Link it down in the description below. You can get it from there and help support the channel at the same time. Now on the front panel of the Note 8, pretty sure everyone knows this, we have that 6.3 inch Super AMOLED display, and it was a 1440p panel. What I can tell you is, at that time when it first came out, it was a tremendous panel, and even now it is still a really good panel. If this thing had a 120Hz refresh rate, this panel would probably still be one of the best panels for sure. Now it's not perfect, it does have a little bit of bezel on the top and bottom, but I still think for a lot of people out there, this specific panel still looks really good, it still performs really well in terms of an AMOLED display, and I think anybody would be totally okay with this panel, especially the fact that it curves on the sides as well, which makes this phone feel that much more premium. Now on the bottom we have that USB Type-C port as well as that S Pen, and that in and of itself is a humongous feature of the Note lineup, and there's a rumor that Samsung may actually be removing their Note lineup. I hope that's not true, but if they do, that S Pen is going to be surely missed. It's one of my favorite things about that phone for sure, and it's just a stylus on steroids. It brings a lot more capability. You can do a lot more with that device with that S Pen, so that's another big thing to keep in mind. You have the micro SD card slot support in this phone as well, so that's huge, as well as IP certification, which is pretty surprising for a 2017 phone, which now costs much cheaper. And on the back you have that standard glass back with wireless charging, which is huge, and you have that camera setup up top. Now this dual camera setup, a 12 megapixel wide angle lens and then a 12 megapixel telephoto lens, at that time was actually a pretty good camera setup, and I don't think this may have been the first Note phone with a dual camera setup. I could be mistaken. I totally forget about the Note 7 because I never owned it, but with that dual camera setup you're definitely getting a really decent camera setup for a 2017 phone. You can shoot 4K videos on it. Unfortunately, you cannot do 4K at 30, which does kind of suck a little bit, but again, at the end of the day, this was a 2017 phone, so we kind of have to give it a little bit, cut some slack for it. But the quality of this camera is still actually pretty decent. If you're trying to take photos outside and videos, for the most part, they're going to look okay. They have optical image stabilization, and it's not going to be that bad of a camera lens for sure. Now, is it going to be perfect? Absolutely not. There's going to be a lot of problems with it. I think more so in terms of the frame rate and the lack of ultra-wide sensor, but you still have a telephoto lens that you can, film with or, shoot video on. So that really kind of future-proofed it by itself a little bit. And on the front, you have an 8 megapixel wide angle lens, then I guess a 2 megapixel, iris scanner, which is like an eye scanner, but it's not really worth noting because it's not really that big of a deal. But the front camera may be the biggest, disadvantage for this camera setup because it doesn't shoot 4K at 60 and because it just isn't really that great of a front camera. That's one of the bigger problems with this specific phone, but the back camera is actually pretty decent. It just so happens that the front camera really isn't that great, so to kind of keep that in mind going through. But in terms of the camera setup, it's definitely not bad, but that's definitely something to kind of keep in mind. But one thing that is pretty bad on this device would definitely be the software. So this phone ended off with the Android Pie with One UI 1, and what I can tell you is that for sure, this phone could have easily supported the next version of One UI easily. I'm not too sure why this phone didn't get the next version. It's just so weird to me. I don't know why, Samsung is always being weird about it. They eventually did switch up their lineup a little bit, but still, if this thing got Android 10, I feel like that would have improved the overall software and really showcased what Samsung could have been able to do for their older generation of phones. But, I've talked about this thing for years now, and even now when I still bring it up, I can tell you a lot of people love this phone. It's more than a capable enough phone, and the software wise is one of the limiting things about it. The hardware is there, it's just the software that's limiting. You can always throw a custom launcher on it. You can't really custom ROM this thing either, so you're pretty limited in that, but the software is definitely one area that I'm not too much of a fan of, to be completely honest. So in terms of software, that pretty much covers it up. Now in terms of the internals and the performance side, this thing has the Qualcomm Snapdragon 835 chipset, an Adreno 540 GPU, and 6 gigs of RAM on each model. And that's actually quite a bit of RAM. Our iPhones, the 12 Pro and 12 Pro Max, just got 6 gigs of RAM. And obviously iOS, Android completely different, but you're getting still 6 gigs of RAM on this phone, which is still pretty decent. Now I will tell you, day-to-day performance on this phone is not going to be an amazingly smooth experience, but it's going to be better than what you you think. When you factor in the fact that this phone came out in 2017 and it was the flagship of that year, but now it's, a sub $300 phone, that's actually a really cool thing about this device. Now, whenever I use this thing, whenever I went about it, playing games and stuff, obviously I'm not using this phone as a main phone ever. I'm just kind of testing it to see how it is. And it was a pretty good experience, like it does the job, but it's not perfect. It's not even comparable to something like a OnePlus that came out that year, or the Pixel or Nexus was the Pixel 2, I think, or the Pixel 3 that came out this year. And even that phone, even the Note 8 doesn't compare to those phones because of the software limitations. Even though internally this phone has much better hardware, it's just the software that really limits it, to be completely honest. Now, if you're playing games and stuff like that, I think you're going to be okay for the most part. It's definitely not going to be the fastest thing. There may be some glitched frames, but I'm still pretty shocked by how well of a performing device this thing is. I mean, this thing, for the most part, got the job done and then some. Like, it handled really everything I threw at it. Now, is it perfect? Like I said before, no. But if you're doing light tasks, even some, multitasking or split screen multitasking, you're pretty much going to have a perfectly fine experience with the Samsung Galaxy Note 8 than maybe another phone that came out this year. But when you look at the phones that came out in 2020, they don't really, compete well. The 2020 phones blow all these older ones out of the water. So when it comes in terms of the performance, the Samsung Galaxy Note 8 definitely wins. Now, ending it off with the battery life, this is another area where I think the Note 8 kind of lacks in. It has a 3300 mAh battery. Now, it has wireless charging and fast charging and stuff like that, but because that smaller size battery on this bigger sized phone that had a pretty ginormous panel at the time, high resolution phone, and the software that really bogged it down, that really didn't help this phone out in any category. So that's another minor thing that may be a big deal to some people, but just know that you probably won't get the best battery life award from this thing. It's not going to be amazing. Like I said before, the Pixel lineup of that year was better. The OnePlus lineup of that year was better in terms of, I think, the smoothness and the battery, but the build quality of this phone is something different, but I'll get into that in a second. But in terms of the battery life, very, very, very average for a 2017 phone. Now, to kind of sum up this video and to answer the question, is the Samsung Galaxy Note 8 still worth it in 2020 and the later part of 2020? What I will tell you is that, there's some pros and there's some cons of this device. Is it perfect? Absolutely not, but I'm not expecting this phone to be perfect. I'm just expecting this phone to be good, or a good value per dollar. And I think when you factor in the cost, it's $250 or something like that on Amazon. You can probably get it cheaper on eBay. That's not a bad price to pay for this type of hardware of this phone. I mean, when you pick up this phone and you feel it, you can still feel the premiumness of this device. It doesn't feel like a cheap phone at all. And there's a lot of budget phones that came out this year, including the Note 20, which isn't a budget phone, but that phone feels cheaper than this one because of that plastic back on the Note 20. And this phone feels and looks and just feels and screams premiumness to me. That is a huge asset of this device. And when you have a phone, that feels this good, it's definitely going to make you feel better about owning it. But definitely when it comes down to the battery life, it's not great. It's barely good in my opinion. When it comes down to the overall performance, it's not that great either, like I said before. When it comes down to the camera, it's just very, very average, I would say. It's not anything I would brag about, but I think it's better than a lot of phones that came out in 2017. But you can't do 4K at 60, no 4K on the front camera as well, so that's pretty dated already. And the battery life just isn't that great either, but and when you factor all those things away, I mean, that's like 99% of the phone right there. This phone still turns on. I mean, it still has a lot of capability. You can always download a bunch of apps on here and throw a custom launcher on it and have a better experience. But I would say if you want to pick this phone up, go for it. But I would highly recommend picking up something that is still kind of supported with software. Something like a Samsung Galaxy Note 9 would be a much better deal in my opinion. That is a far better phone, and that's still kind of current because it's still got One UI 2. However, One UI 3 is coming out, and if you can spare some extra money, getting a Samsung Galaxy S10 would be my favorite phone to recommend to people. That's still a timeless phone and still going to be updated for a very long time from now. So that really pretty much covers it up. If you guys have any other questions or anything, let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that would mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. Every single subscriber that we get really does count, so it means so much if you guys can hit that. Also check out the other links down in the description as well. My Twitter, my Instagram, my other channels. More importantly than everything else, every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.